The director Fred Schepisi of Plenty is one of a generation of Australian directors who have achieved worldwide acclaim, and you, Bruce Beresford, Peter Weir, among others, are now making American films or English films. How do you account for this blossoming, so suddenly it would seem, of Australian directors?
Yeah, it's not suddenly. I mean, I know it seems suddenly here. It just took quite a while for our pictures to get here. You know, it really, if you like, the new wave of Australian film directors really started coming through right at the beginning of the 70s.
And something that they all seemed to have in common was a contact with roots, with the Aboriginal peoples, with a sense of tribal, racial thing that might cling to our memories. Is that something especially close to you? Chat of Jimmy Blacksmith, of course.
Yes and no. You know, I mean, Devil's Playground was my first film, which is about a boy in a monastery,
Yeah,
so... No, but why it seems that way is, you know, we had to really fight to get to make films. I mean, and I'm talking about a 10-year fight to break down distribution problems, which we did. I mean, it was a lockout, why mince words. The Americans and the English locked us out of our own theaters, and so we ended up having to get Restrictive Trade Practices Act in force to break down the cartel that was stopping us getting into our own cinemas. And we had to get government support because nobody was going to put any money into Australian films.
Well, what kinds of films were being made at that time that
None.
you would choose as being...
None.
None. The entire
whole
national cinema was
there
nowhere?
there were some very few American sort of films made by Americans coming in and using the country. And there was a couple of groups making, no, I think there were only 4 films made, so none is the answer. And what we wanted to do was be able to, and you know, I think previously, before we were shut down, that we were making some Australian films, but they were really trying to imitate America. And what all of us wanted to do was make films about our own culture, to understand that we have a culture, that we don't want to lose it, that we have a voice, an outlook, an irreverence, an unusual attitude on life.
Well,
and that's what we want to expose in our films.
Yeah, there was a passion in Jimmy Blacksmith that I think comes close to what you're describing. In fact, that picture in memory becomes more of a quintessential Australian film, for me at least, maybe than some of the others.
Yes, I think that's fair enough. But I mean, the reason you are noticing this roots thing in our material is that that's what we're doing. We're looking for our roots, going back and studying our history, which has never really been done on film. So, you know, we wanted to learn about ourselves, explore ourselves, and record it, if you like.
And apparently a lot of other people have been interested too. Your career has skyrocketed, and I'm wondering if, are you now living in England or America because you're closer now to this film establishment?
No, I was for a while. I came over here to, you know, to do certain things, to test my talent, if you like, hone my skills, if that was going to be possible here, and not the least, perhaps confirm approaches that I had.
And something you've continued too in your films here is that wonderful painter's eye. Do you have training as a painter? Do you have a special closeness or fondness for certain painters whose vision you still share?
I'm influenced by painters, yes. No special group, because obviously that's going to vary with every subject that you're dealing with. I also work with the director of photography, the same director of photography on every film.
Because Plenty brings up the fact there's a painterly vision there that has nothing to do with brightness, hard edges, and fresh, vivid colors. It's a drubby kind of look that I guess you intentionally went after. Would you describe that?
Yeah, well, very much so, but that's dictated by the period, the look of each period, and the availability of power that would have been around in that period. I mean, say, if you take just after the war, there wasn't a lot of power around, so everything was running on about half power, and the lights were quite, almost like a brownout, right? So rather than do tricky period lighting or try and imitate the dumb lighting from past movies, we tried to work out exactly what the look was for each period, you know, going right up to, you know, when the fluorescents first came in. You remember how sort of sharp and luminescent they were. And, you know, So that's what dictated the style throughout the film.
Now, if you take films like Barbarossa, Jimmy Blacksmith, and now Plenty, although they might seem to be quite a bit different, I don't think they are, because that character of the outsider who's being tugged at by a memory in the past, or call it a racial trait in the past, and it keeps coming forth into the present, and they can't really quite live in the present now. They can't quite live in civilization as we know it. Is that fair? These characters are kind of half in and half out. Like Hemingway's...
Yeah, I guess so. That's a bit of a coincidence, though. I mean, maybe that's the sort of material that attracts me. But I haven't deliberately gone looking for that. And, you know, I've written a lot of other stuff that I haven't been able to do. And frequently what you get judged on is that which you've produced, obviously.
But is it fair, Barbarossa's mythic cowboy image and Meryl Streep's heroic romance image from World War II, they're so blinding that they can't relate now to our own present, it seems.
But that's a coincidence. It's not specifically a theme in my work.
Well, let's take the other extreme then. What is something that is wildly different from any of those that you're still contemplating doing?
Oh, I wanted to do a tap dancing film.
Really?
Yeah, really. And I've got an original comedy on the sexes, Battle of the Sexes, that I'd like to do. And I've actually had a comedy that I wrote about a man who's been married twice and was having an affair. So you could look at 3 stages of relationships. Nobody wants to do that, I don't know why.
Our time's almost out, but I had to ask you a kind of pet question of mine. Directors like William Wyler and Orson Welles have become notorious for their shooting and reshooting and reshooting. That seems to be your reputation, too.
Yes, I'm going to kill whoever put that in the press kit, because it's not true. I mean, it's sort of true, but it's not true. If you're going to let things play, if you're going to try and hold things in one shot, it necessitates a lot of takes, because you can't take the best bit from this one and the best bit from that one and the best bit from that one, which you might do in 4 or 5 takes, and then combine them by editing. If you're going to let it play, if you're going to watch the passing clouds on someone's face, which makes the difference, you've got to get it all in one take. So you've got to keep going until you get it. Sometimes you'll get absolutely everything except it tails off at the end, or it'll be a different piece of magic at the end, and you know that if you got something you'd seen somewhere else combined with all of that, it would be stupendous. So you've got to go for it. But then 20 takes of one shot is really the equivalent of 4 takes of 5 shots, isn't it?
Indeed. Okay. And now Sidney Lumet, when he was shooting the play about Dead Game, the play that Sidney Lumet made into a film with Christopher Reeve and Michael Caine, they shot it in that kind of extended take approach. Death Trap.
Death Trap.
Right. That kind of approach seems to be rather characteristic. Also, finally,
you know, Sidney Lumet's very good. And everything's very planned, and you know, he doesn't do a lot of cutting or coverage. I mean, he's a damn good director. Very stylistic.
Have you ever seen Hiroshima Mon Amour?
Yes,
Do
I
you
have.
know René's work?
Yes, I have.
Because you can go from cut to cut. Years can pass, locations can change, and there's no explanation. We must draw it out as we watch. Plenty is full of that.
Yeah.
It's a game you play with us, or is that fair?
Well, it's a game. Yeah, I'm making you work. I want you to think. I want you to keep on your toes. I don't want to get ahead of you. But I'm also trying to get you to follow, and incidentally on the writer's behalf, because it's his desire as well. I'm getting you to follow the emotional line and development of our characters, particularly the main character, Susan. And that's the best way to do it.
It does keep us on our toes. Fred Schepisi does that all the time, and the fact that he wants to make a tap dancing movie doesn't surprise me, I guess. In New York City, on the set of Plenty, this is John Tibbetts.